Okay, so starting with 1811 here. I've done the cards handed out in the budget. The cards, the French are down to 6. The loss of Poland, not complete loss, but whatever. And not getting an additional conquest this turn. Austria saving itself at the drums of war. These have been important things. On the other hand, the coalition got something like 8 cards, and the Brits added 2 to that, not having any more navies to build. They took a free card. The French had to supply the Spanish with a resource in order to build their ship back. And now we're in the diplomacy phase. As you can see, forces building up. Austria rebuilt their army in pieces. Their hope is to try to get Schwarzenberg back into play. Bennigsen, well, he's got both Kutuzov and Wittgenstein coming forward with a lot of troops. That'll be in the strategic movement type phase. I have to decide how I want to apportion them, but he's got a heck of an army there. However, Napoleon has rebuilt the Grand Army. He's back in supply. And now we have a really, really tough decision by the coalition. Although we had an ordering here. Yeah, first the coalition does diplomacy. So their tough call is whether to bring Prussia into the war, which obviously, you know, from a land strategic standpoint is what they need. They could perhaps break the back of the French at this point. Or to go for Spain. They have a special ability to go for Spain right now because the Spanish lost as part of that naval battle. And actually, no. They don't have a shot at Spain. A naval battle doesn't count. It has to be a major or minor defeat. That doesn't include what happened, I don't think. I'm not sure. It's not really all that well defined anywhere that I know of. Yeah, see, there's no major or minor determination on naval combat. That's only a land combat thing. So, I guess the decision's made for us. And we'll figure that out. And Prussia's back in the war. The French aren't going to commit to any diplomacy. The Brits didn't go for a minor as well. But I'm looking at some of these cards, you know. Okay, I'll grant to you. This is a danger. I'll grant to you that the French have such an advantage in points just because of the better leaders, etc., and Napoleon being able to move on a 1. And of course, Schwarzenberg kind of fixes that. But it makes it very hard to play some of these cards for events. And in particular, some of them look like they just will not do too much. I'm not talking about the forced ones. Those I'm going to have to play if they are brought out. But something like Barbary Pirates, the foreign war here, I find myself totally unwilling to play these. You know, get one British or minor allied fleet out of the way for, a turn maybe longer. Historically, these things happened. And this is a problem that I see with a number of CDGs, is the cards have to be so carefully balanced and crafted so that you do want to play events some of the time. And with the standard ones, you do want to play events some of the times, you want to play points some of the times. I think the games where, hey, the event's there and it gets triggered anyway, or triggered at the option and you get to play it. Designs like Twilight Struggle, where the events can be triggered by the opposing player when you play the points. Those kind of systems tend to cause the events to happen. Maybe not as much as they should, but at least they do happen. These games where you have to make a choice between the points and an event that helps you, very often basically it's either, you know, the events are always good and better than the points, in which case, you know, who cares too much about the points, or the points and keeping them in your deck is such an important facet that you don't play the events at all. And the world becomes kind of stale. It's as if it's a game without many events in it. And that just troubles me. It's not what the CDG design is meant to create. And I feel like this game has largely fallen into that trap of, hey, the cards are too valuable, except for the crappy cards, that, you know, you'd want to play these events. And that it's a painful situation. It's a matter, I think, of a designer who either didn't fully understand the CDG implications or isn't willing, you know, or able to put in the kind of work, and I have no idea how to go about it to get that really fine balance that works. And even when the balance is there, right? Even when the balance is there, you're still stuck in this position of it's a hard choice every time, and the events will probably be suppressed a little more than they should be because of that. So, I don't know. So, I'm running into some kind of clunky issues, not with the system itself, but with the mechanics of actually... Uh-oh, I can move some of these down. Of actually maintaining the game state in terms of trying to remember, hey, how big a force can any given commander hold? Those numbers are big enough, and there's not really enough support for them in the way that, say, Empires and Arms has with their core display sheets and such, not for the strength points. Although that's a lot more mechanically fiddly, this requires a little bit more mental acuity in terms of like, hey, Napoleon's in command of the Grand Army, that means it can hold 18, and remembering to count all those stacks of 2s and 1s instead of just there being a strength point counter there. I would be a lot happier if this was reverted to strength points. I understand the usage of the core, especially they do add something to the game with the elite markers and stuff like that, and the morale values of the different units. I just don't think it's a particularly elegant way to represent things in terms of how at least the burden it puts on my poor little mind. And I find myself making clumsy little mistakes there. When I add that to everything else in the game, this is not going to be a favorite of mine by any means. I don't think it's the most telling blow against it, but it's one that's disposing me more negatively. Unlike the Continental system, the Snare of Bayonne is actually a really good card in terms of the operations it produces. It's not necessarily a bad card in terms of effect, except that it causes the Dos de Mayo card to be allowed. But I want to get this out of my hand so I don't have to play it as an event, so I can get the points. So I generate those and start a siege here of Gibraltar, of all things. And I didn't lose anything, so I get to keep that siege up. That was kind of risky, actually. The reason I'm moving there is Napoleon's got a pretty good defensive structure here. I feel fairly safe. I can throw a card or whatever in terms of being able to intercept if the Allies try to do anything. The only real problem I have is that all that territory kind of in central Austria, I'm going to lose that, but we'll see what happens. Now, what's interesting here, at this point, the Austrians could actually link up with the Prussians, but they're not able to take supply from Prussia. So they're still not going to be able to rally and not be able to combine armies. Not that they really could anyway. They're too big to fit under one commander. So, but the Prussian army may be able to either advance on France and cause a threat that I'm not expecting, or else try to cut around and hit Davout down here and Napoleon's supply line. Although it's going to be pretty tough because I got supply coming from both directions. A little bit of jockeying. Bellegarde got himself slammed, not by an intercept, but by Napoleon coming into here. And then Bennigsen was unable to support him. Napoleon swung up, drove Bellegarde back again, very damaged force, and then swept up to hit Bennigsen. Knocked him back. First battle was pretty indecisive. Napoleon won, but not by a lot. Second one over here drove him into a disordered state, which there isn't much left either. There's just the guard, which I wasn't using because I had other one-star units. The French Guard and Guard Cav are both gone. And then the Spaniards, after a couple of rounds, managed to finally take Gibraltar. Gibraltar is important because it's worth a card. Not in and of itself. It's not a swing of a card. It's not a card lost by the coalition and one gained by Napoleon, but Gibraltar and Malta together combined to make that. So they're taking a card away from the coalition, and the coalition needs cards more than Napoleon does. And now I'm in a position where maybe I can threaten Portugal. And this puts, again, that hard kind of choice that I feel is perhaps unrealistic. Well, is definitely unrealistic in the era. Which is England, who is doing nothing in order to respond to the threat to Portugal, would have to prevent anything from happening on the continent. This is something that, for all of its flaws, and it has some, the Napoleonic Wars over there does not suffer from as a CDG, because each country has its own hand of cards and has to use it for its own uses. And I think that better reflects the situation. There's no unified grand command here where you're focusing resources, to one. Hey, either England's going to intervene in Portugal or the Austrians are going to defend themselves. No, that doesn't make any sense. In fact, it probably doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense even if you were to take it into a modern day situation, as is done with Paths of Glory, which has the same kind of problem. And it's a well-loved game, but I can't understand why, because it just does not reflect reality in this way. Except as a game, I mean, as a game, this might be fine too. There's a certain level of allocation of resources that happened in the more modern era, especially if you're looking at a World War II type game. But still, it wouldn't be, there will be no resources to make any kind of operation of any type, in this theater, if there were forces there. The truth of the matter is that forces on the ground had some initiative and some capability, and they had some resources, and they could do something. Maybe not, as much as they might need to. Maybe you have to pre-allocate some of it within some limits. But this system clearly does not reflect very well on what's happening. And honestly, I think the same kind of flaw, and I like it much better, but it's a lighter game and doesn't cover quite as much. Age of Napoleon, I think, is susceptible to this same kind of problem. I didn't see it there as much because the focus was always on the land battle in Europe for me, but whatever. And the coalition decides it's time to swing their effort over. And that's the thing, is eventually something important enough is going to happen that you do, if your opponent does challenge you in a certain theater, you do have to respond in it, I guess. That's kind of the one saving grace of these kind of designs. The problem is both players could end up focusing on one theater very heavily for some reason. But basically what was happening was things were not playing out well to the coalition's intentions over here in Central Europe. Now, I did gather Bennigsen's forces under Kutuzov, but then the French used a card, an expensive card, banked a point, and started an invasion of Portugal. Well, losing Portugal would make life much, much more difficult And there is some desire to bring Spain into the war, force the snare of Bayonne and all that. And the way to do that is to engage the Spaniards. If they're going to invade Portugal, okay, it's time to do it. So a naval card was played. The Brits ended up blockading almost everything. There's still a Dutch fleet out here. And I think that's it. Everything else, I knocked out a couple of French fleets. This is using the Admiralty card, which allows me a great deal of effort, of capability navally. I can move all the British and their allies. That doesn't include the other major powers that are allied with Britain, though. And I got Wellington into Portugal, where he's going to be a real threat to the Spaniards. It might have been a mistake for the French to open up this can of worms. You know, they took Gibraltar. That's pretty good. That's about as good as I can hope. And now I've directed the attention in that direction. The problem is I got what I want over here, and I can't really focus over against Prussia right now until I clear Austria up. Austria will be a forced alliance, so it felt like it was time to start adventuring in Spain. We'll see how that works. Anyway, the French are up with their chance to react, and it's going to be tough to deal with Wellington because he's pretty kick-ass. And my navies are kind of locked up now, so I don't have the capability to just, go trying to break my way into England, unless I want to spend a lot of cards to try to open up a route. Now the Brits, the main army's out of there. There's just some militia and some guard, second corps here. And I got MacDonald, but he's not capable of facing that. So it would be until next year, really, before I could launch another attack on Britain. Now, if I defeat Britain again, this game is in serious jeopardy of being out of reach of the coalition, I think, because that would make England a forced ally for France, and that means they're just not going to come back in, because I really doubt that there's any card like there is for Prussia and Austria, I assume, in the punishments deck that'll allow the English to come back in. But we've kept the escalade pretty low by not being very successful, I think. So it may be hard to get to that punishment stack. I actually have a worry about the balance between the victory points and the escalade. This is similar to the kind of feeling that I have with what I think is truly an outstanding competitive game, Unconditional Surrender, for World War II. It covers all kinds of details, very heavy strategic game for World War II. But I do feel like at the end, kind of like CDG's card management, there's this weird sort of victory condition management in it, where you're trying to arrange your surrenders at the right time and trying to figure out how long you want to hold out with certain countries in order to trigger, later victory, longer range victory conditions, or how quickly you want to defeat someone in the case of the Axis for that. And I feel like maybe there's something like that in this game as well, where Napoleon has a lot of control over the pace. Maybe he wants to blunder and bungle about a bit to avoid pushing the escalade up too much, so that he can hold on to the epic deck as long as possible and then try to push for a victory late in the war, but without, or late in the period of the game, without, being as successful as Napoleon actually was, and somehow achieve victory that way. And that if that's the case, it tastes wrong. And that's I haven't played Unconditional Surrender enough to know if it has that, and I certainly haven't played this enough to know it. But it leaves me with that suspicion. The French actually passed conserving points. I don't know if they can. I'm worried about the continental blockade, actually. Must be played as soon as possible if all French fleets are destroyed or blockaded. That's actually the case. So I had to play this. I'm going to take the 2 APs and do the same thing, just bank them. I didn't have anything I really wanted to do. But I get a victory point. I get 3 escalade, and I don't know if that is if both are affected by that modification discussion there. So let's see. Okay, so they don't say here, do they? No, the escalade goes up by 3. Victory point goes up by 1 for every turn the blockade's in place. How is the blockade in place? Okay. First we take the escalade. 11, 12, 13. That's automatic. The blockade is in place when all ports from St. Petersburg to Zara are either French or defeated in a forced peace. And there are quite a few places that are not in that situation. There's a chit for continental blockade, so I can remove this and try to find it. There is not a chit for continental. Oh, there it is. Okay. And I don't know where to put these. I guess I'll put it out here with the Corsairs and hopefully remember about it. I forgot to say the coalition ended up moving in to try to take Vienna. I get a free siege attempt at the end of the year, but maybe I'll be playing a card. The problem, of course, with this is Napoleon's free to come down and slash into that. That's only Bellegarde, and he only has 6 strength points. Well, I piddled away. I played the Genius of Napoleon card for points, and I didn't really have much to do. I chased Bellegarde out of Vienna. I don't want to keep chasing him because I need to kind of sit on Vienna to prevent it from falling. I hope I have a supply line here somewhere. Oh yeah, I do, through Salzburg. Okay. I used additional points to take some of Portugal over. The siege was successful here. I'm out of... There may be more somewhere, but I don't know where the hell there would be. I'm out of the little control markers for Spain. I guess it's not expected that Spain take more than 1 territory or something, but it's really unlikely that they're going to be able to succeed against Portugal. But the thing is, I really don't have any use for my points anymore. I don't know where the winter card is, but I'd like to push that somewhere. I don't think I can declare war on the Hanseatic League at this point. I don't remember. Like, I know I can do diplomacy on them, but they won't. Yeah, it's not possible to declare war later in the turn. So there's no way that I can just slam into there. I don't think I declared war on any majors, which would have increased escalation. There's a lot of stuff. Like I flipped through the rules and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. A declaration of war on a neutral major power increases the escalade by 1. Gosh. I think I would have checked that. It's probably, there's a chart that lists all the escalade effects as well. But there's just all these little notes, and I'm like, gee, I don't remember. That leaves us to the coalition. I'm not sure what they're going to do. They have a lot of cards. They don't have a lot of points that they want to spend necessarily. This one's probably safe to spend if I want to. And then I have some fuse I could spend. Alternatively, I could spend the Spanish galleons and put them in kind of an ugly position. But not really. It could force the French to lose their card, which they probably don't want to do, because if they defeat Austria, then they've defeated both Austria and Prussia and can do the Erfurt card. But then it means that Spain won't be producing troops and it'll be in danger of being conquered. And then maybe I will have won at the Snare of Bayonne. But maybe I won't. Maybe I'm happy enough letting the Brits conquer Spain. I'm convinced the Bellegarde move was a mistake since I had to withdraw anyway. I really can't throw more against Napoleon. It's just not... It doesn't look like I'm going to beat him enough to take Austria out of his hands. That probably makes this card questionable when I played it, but whatever. Now we're going to suffer the consequences. So instead of continuing to play around down here, I moved Wellington down, took this by siege. That's honors of war, so the Spaniards are going to come back over there. They don't end up, I think, vulnerable. Although, yeah, I still have a navy. So, unless I sail and destroy their navy, the trap of Bayonne thing isn't going to be forced. On the other hand, conquering Spain might be a good move as well. I'm not sure what the victory point effects of that are. I don't think there's any effect to destroying Spain as a French ally, which means I kind of need to do something else. I have to force them to battle, and I have nothing that I can really do. I can force them to surrender, and then what? You know, I have progress through their territory, so I could start launching attacks against France or something. But it looks really, really difficult. I don't see anything that gives me a point for taking Spain out, whereas the Snare of Bayonne would increase the escalade at least. I don't know. Anyway, won't be part of the blockade. Additionally, I threw a ship out into the Corsairs box. It's a way I can lose a card, and I feel like I've won the naval battle. We'll see. France is only down a few ships now. They only have a couple of ships in here, so conceivably they could build up their navy, but overall I think we kind of got caught there. And we go to the end of turn crap, wherever that is. And we have any sieges left? I don't think so. Which means we go to the attrition and stuff like that. Okay, so the French have taken Tyrol and given it to the Bavarians to create the Kingdom of Bavaria. They took Venice to add to the Kingdom of Italy. That's going to add more troops. I have to look on all these different charts to try to see what the hell affects what. And this is really beginning to get annoying. Oh, interesting. A major power getting in an alliance for the first time is +1 for each major power. So actually Prussia entered alliance, and I don't think I scored them for that. Turkey definitely entered, and I'm pretty sure I didn't score that. So we're going to enter, we're going to boost the escalade by 1. That gets us into the ugly point, right? This isn't victory points, this is just escalade points. Now France has an ugly choice. Now, I played this card and probably shouldn't have. Because, again, one of these little piddly little pieces of rule, it took me forever to find the rules on the forced alliance. They're over under the diplomacy, even though they have nothing to do with diplomacy per se, except that they prevent diplomacy. But that's not what they're saying. They have to do, and there's no reference here, with the conquest rules and the drums of war card, or the number of conquests or whatever here. This is the section where I expected it to be in. I stared at these multicolored garbage for a while trying to, I mean, really reading it almost word by word to try to find if there was anything that applied. Now, in some cases, I could skim sentences and say, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to this. But there were several paragraphs where I really had to pay a lot of attention to see if the rule was hidden there. Nah, it's way over here, and it's nicely defined here, but there's no index in this thing. Anyway, would have been easier to find on my online copy of the rules, but what it turns out is, if I want to force an alliance, I have to discard a card now. Now, this is not absolutely certain. So, when a forced peace occurs following the defeat, the Empire player may then discard an operations card of any value during the conquest phase. So, if I hadn't finished the siege of this, I'd have a card that I could discard and do this. Instead, I have the damn Erfurt card, which creates the Confederation of the Rhine, which I really wanted to do, especially if I'm entering escalade. Austria can re-enter, so I'll probably pass on them, but I would have liked to have done both. On the other hand, over here, somewhere, maybe over here, I found it, Drums of War. The power will be obliged to surrender, suffer a stricter peace. A forced alliance is possible at the end of the forced peace, which doesn't sound like I'd have to be making the choice now. Unfortunately, I'm going to let it sit like this, and I made other errors, but I'm finding a number of factors about this, and the rules are the biggest of them, about this game very, very annoying to handle and to cope with. The little terrain differentials I have trouble seeing. Oh yeah, I can't add Bohemia. I can't add Salzburg because that's part of Austria, and Austria is actually pretty big. These things just don't jump out at you the way they should if they're going to have a significant effect on play. The differentiation between provinces and the subdivisions, whatever the little territories are, zones or whatever, is a little too obscure. Really all I see is the little zones. And that's fine when you're playing militarily, but when you're trying to come up with your peace conditions or whatever, it doesn't work. It's very hard to see what's going on. Anyway, and this is why it's taking me so damn long, because the game is a bitch to play. It's just, I know that I'm going to be facing this, or I'm going to be facing problems over here. It's just never going to be smooth. So anyhow, when do I play this fucker? I play this during diplomacy. So I could discard this and hope for the best. I would get a couple of victory points off of it there. I don't think I get anything off the forced peace. Again, I scan this long list of things, and I don't see anything. I don't know. I didn't get anything for Bavaria. I get a card for the Kingdom of Bavaria. And likewise, a lot of the things, you have to either memorize all the charts for this game, which you might do if you play it fairly consistently, say a couple times a year or whatever. But it's not something that's, appealing to kind of the grazer or browser of games like I am, in terms of the play aids, etc., just aren't easily accessible, and the way things are disposed of on the board with these little holding boxes and stuff, and the core units, it just doesn't work that well for me, at least. I think we're at the end of this turn. I'm not sure. I'm always flipping through the rules now. On the back of the rule book, there is a sequence of play, so I saw that recently. And I don't know, it doesn't terribly tell me in much detail, but I think it's as good as the front, and I'll just assume it is. Which means, which means we're going to be done here, and got some new stuff coming in. We got some Spanish who were honors of war victims. more Russian leaders. And I guess that's it for the turn. And as we enter into 1812, this is sort of the fateful year for Napoleon, but historically, but well, maybe that's already happened here. Let's see. A lot of exciting stuff. First of all, the decks are a lot bigger. They have the punishment cards in them, and those have been dealt out. Point-wise, both sides have big hands. The French, a victory over Austria, a lot of territory under their control, things like Bavaria added to the deck or added to their draw. So I think they had a 10-card draw. The coalition didn't have that big, but the English are able to generate additional cards. During budget, some interesting things were played. The Miseries of War, Triumph of Erfurt. Triumph of Erfurt, we know what happens. Created some victory points as I blur around moving. Created some points I may not have spent. Some victory points. French are up to 16. They're doing pretty well, actually. But now comes the big hurdle. The punishments deck is supposed to be harsh on them. But some interesting things were played for the Miseries of War. What that did, and continues to do, is until the end of the game, Russia and Austria lose 2 production points. France loses 4. However, there's no limit to how many cards the coalition can have in their initial draw, which could be a big deal if Austria comes back in, especially, or if they gain Spain or something like that. Let's see, during diplomacy, the Russo-Turkish War was played. Now, because Turkey was coalition, all it did was disassociate them, but it also allowed Napoleon to reposition the Turkish forces on the Russian border, and it could cause some serious problems for the Russians to have that take place. Let's see, what else? The English took a shot at Morocco with the thought of, hey, if we can cross across, we can cause some problems with those additional troops. There were some choices that were not made. For example, the French had the Corsairs card, which wouldn't have much effect as long as the Brits can keep a navy in there. Obviously they can. The American Noir. It hurts British resources once on the next budget phase, which will be next year if it happened. And then they have to take a fleet and put it into the foreign war box. That doesn't sound too impressive. I'm not close enough, I don't think, in the fleet situation to really be able to fight that battle. I think I'm going to be more forced to fight the land war at this point. And this, which can screw up a coalition march pretty nasty. The coalition had some cards they didn't want to play. Similarly, subsidies could get them additional cards. Or no points, right? Yeah, points are cards, either one. I didn't really need either, although I did spend some cards. Metternich. I'm probably going to play this during the activations. Mallet, same kind of thing. Uhlans, an additional loss for the loser. Yeah, I may want to play the subsidies. A major ally of Britain or a major power is defeated by France. Doubles its resources, or 2 cards are added to the coalition turn for the upcoming turn. You know, a 3-point card is nice, but I don't feel like I have enough deck. So now I've got additional cards coming. Bernadotte, that's going to give me Sweden joins the coalition. Well, they're already in. So I could get Bernadotte and an additional card. And this was played back in budget, so I could actually play this. But if I hold it and play it during the activation phase, I can get it and get an activation as well, and it could be one of my crappy units. I assume Bernadotte disappears from the French if that happens. I think, yeah, he's got a counter, which looks actually better on the Swedish side. It's funny, some games, I think War and Peace, for example, gives him a better rating as a French general and then degrades him as a Swedish king. So that's a possibility, although I may need the points there. Other than that, the strategic redeployment, we've got the French moving up to take the Prussians on now. And not a hell of a lot else. The Spaniards moving around to get out of the way. The Russians shifting over to try to defend Prussia. And is there a... Oh, there's a Confederation of the Rhine piece. Huh. I don't really get a chance to play that because I played the card during the diplomacy phase, so I don't have the troops in the budget phase, but next year I'll have them. We're getting close to the end, actually. The game actually ends in 14. I may go another year for whatever reason, but the Austrians are frozen out through 14 because this was a major loss, the Drums of War card. They're out for 3 full years, so theoretically they shouldn't be in the game until the game is over. We'll see. It feels kind of weird. This is a real plague factor for War and Peace. I'm not as familiar, with this game, whether or not it will be. But at some point or another, France can decide, okay, I'm not going to make this victory condition. And it feels like they're pretty close, to tell you the truth. In terms of victory, Prussia's just going to get me 1 victory point. Russia would get me 2. Well, I got 3 for Britain. That's why I'm doing so well. Russia would get me 2 more. But it's kind of hard to find additional... oh, wait, maybe this is wrong. No, Britain got me 4. Russia will get me 3. It's kind of hard to find the points I need. I need to get 1, 2, 3, 4 more points. The one for Prussia I can probably get. Let's look where else I can get points. Okay, a card could get me a protectorate in Denmark. That's pretty good. Naples, Portugal, Sweden, or Saxony. I have the one in Naples. Portugal's probably not going to be easy. Sweden's going to be tough. Saxony I can probably get. So now I'm at maybe 3 points. So I'm real close if I keep going. I don't think I could get my point back. No, only if I lose Poland. The Snare of Bayonne's worth 2 victory points, though. Usually not a good card. If I can install the blockade, obviously, that's valuable. King of Rome is a card. Napoleonic Europe's a card. I think I've got a shot. So I'm going to keep pushing forward. But if I didn't think I had a shot, I would be worried about the final victory condition, which is simply holding on to all the key areas in France. That's enough. And again, War and Peace has that as well. If Paris is still French at the end of the game, they just win automatically. It's only if the French lose that anyone else has a chance of winning. So yeah, we can keep pushing forward, it looks like. And I think much of that is because we gained so many points off of the invasion of Britain that was successful and got us a good point. So that makes up for whatever losses we had. We should have beaten, what, Prussia twice and Austria twice by this point. and that's those points, pretty much. after that little bit of analysis, I'm going to rewind back here to the diplomatic phase, because I don't think what I did during the, strategic redeployment had an effect. And I'm going to drop this into place. And, geez, now I don't know. I think I'm owed 1 point. I think I already did it. Or I didn't already do it. Yeah. Now that required throwing a card out, a 2-point card, but that's okay. So now we're pretty close. Napoleon ends up driving the Prussians out of Berlin after taking Magdeburg. Quick turn, sieging Saxony, and there's disordered Prussians, which buys us some time to take Saxony. Davout moved forward and took Dresden itself, right? Yeah. And I should have a little flag there. English turn is complicated. Or the Allied turn. They play Metternich, drawing a card out of the French hand. In this case, it's the Genius of Napoleon card that was randomly chosen. And then they get a card. They picked one up and decided to play Bernadotte, which allowed them to march in, and they got lucky. And actually, I think because this guy's in port embassy in blockaded, the Danish fleet is going to come out and get hit by the Swedish fleet. We'll see how that works. Now, what's not specified in here, and I don't know, I don't see any blue writing here, so it's probably not on the special play aid card. It is not. And I don't think there's anywhere in the rules. There's a Bernadotte piece in the French countermix. Obviously, he can't still be a Marshal of France. There may be an intention, because it's not a very good piece, to leave the French with some other Marshal in his place. There are or some other general at least. There are certainly important generals who are not in the game, but the game's pretty good about putting most of the key people in. So I just removed the counter. I don't think a 0-1 extra French general is all that valuable anyway. Bernadotte, as I said, improves a little bit when he takes over as king. But anyway, he's successfully taken Copenhagen. I think that fleet will be discharged from there and attacked by the Swedes. Well, I have to try to find if that's covered in the rules. This is a case where I don't want to look for the rules. I know what they should be, and if they exist, this is what they are. So the fleet was discharged. I fought the battle. It went several rounds, and the Swedes eventually were able to defeat the Danish fleet. That'll never come back. And the Danes got kind of caught, with their pants down over there by the Swedes. I don't want Denmark to just fall, so I sent Soule up, and he captured wherever this is up here, Hamburg. Hamburg's down here. I always get them mistaken. And then with an extra point, which I forgot to spend, I put a big card into play here. I don't feel like those foreign wars are terribly valuable. He used Napoleon, gathered up forces, and continued the siege, and then moved here, throwing the Prussians back. Now, what I think the coalition is going to do, they can stand pat here. I think what they'd like to do is try to save the army or the Prussian position in the war. Königsberg should be here, and I've got an army somewhere. An undemoralized army will help protect that. Blucher's army, unless I rally it, and there really isn't all that much there. It looks like a lot of pieces, but the top ones are all leaders and depots and such not. Isn't really sufficient to defend, but the Russian army may be enough. Can I get it into place? One? Not really. I can't get it up there. It's down here in the swamp on foot. Oh no, it's not. Kutuzov's here, so I could go 1, 2, 3 up to there. Leave some forces behind in the Prussian swamp. That might be my best move. Now, if I do that, there's a problem, which is that the French have this column of march card, which is a one-use, one-point card that I'd love to get out of my hand, or out of my deck, if I ever get a reshuffle. There's a lot more cards now, which prevents them from moving more than one area. Play a big card, banking some points and moving Sewell forward to try to deal with Bernadotte. On the coalition turn, they also played a big card, the Admiralty. This may be a mistake because I may want to funnel forces into Spain, but I used it to move Kutuzov up into Prussia. He was in Poland before in the swamps. And then I used the extra point to grab what, Estremadura? No, not a hose. Oh, Estremadura is the territory. No city for it. I used one of my Portuguese to garrison here. It's easier to get those than English troops, I guess. It's hard to tell because I'm out of English replacements, so English troops might actually be a better choice, except that they're higher morale. It's not like I have a lot of miners, but anyway, I'm not sure which way to go with that. I think actually I'll use the English, because I might need my miners more. And that puts us back in, and we're getting towards the end of the year already. There aren't a lot of turns here for the coalition to try to win the game. Okay, this is not good. Sewell moved up here, and he's actually moved himself out of supply. I can get him into supply in this hex, but I can't get airspace, but I can't get him into supply here. The way I would get him here is to move, and this is what I'm going to do. I took 1 point. I'm going to move this depot up here. But it's going to take me 2 more actions, and I just don't have the time to try to take Copenhagen back, which means that my Danes, which I went over to protect, are probably going to fall. That's bad. That's a victory point because that's going to be the somewhere or another. Conquest of a protectorate, which takes the point away that I gained for that by playing a card, turning it into a protectorate. That may be France's only chance to win an automatic victory, slipping away through me screwing up. I do want this depot here because it helps block the Swedes from coming down, I guess. And I'll hold my other points, I think. Not sure. Kustrin's not terribly important. The problem is I have to get Kutuzov out of there, and I don't have an easy way to do that without moving Napoleon. That may just have to be done. Jeez. That's way out of my supply line, though. It's looking rough. French not doing much. The coalition decides to blow one of their big 3-point cards, Mallet, and get rid of Genius of Napoleon forever. It would be better to do this while it had still been in the French hand. Alternatively, I could have discarded the rest of the French cards, but... and maybe I'm using too much information that I have. Now we're entering bad weather, and it's going to be tough to do anything. The French use their 1 freebie point, not playing a card, move Napoleon up, taking a couple of locations. He's going to be in supply if he attacks Kutuzov here. And I can always drop a depot there if I need to move further. It wasn't worth rallying the Prussian army because I believe it's in Poland. It's hard to tell, but Thorn had better be in Poland. Let's get a Russian marker in it. So that's not going to help protect. Well, I could slip into Prussian territory and maybe, cut French supplies, but maybe get intercepted. So instead, what the Allies did was played the Spanish galleons card, The French chose to discard a random card that ended up being their 1-point card, so they have a little bit more available. This is gone for good now. And we're at the end, the winter turn of this year. A little bit of trickiness going on, but Napoleon scares Kutuzov away. Now, this led to a weird situation where the demoralized Prussians cut the French supply, but it ends up not mattering because, well, actually it does matter. There's a non-demoralized Russian army within Prussia. So there's no surrender that's going to happen. The French are cut off because the Prussians regained this East Prussian, whatever, West Prussia, something, I don't know, had a space. And it led me, it's very easy for me to not really understand as I'm moving what the effects of my actions are going to be. So, you know, the French trying to chase the Russians off, if they had managed to get the Russians out of there or to demoralize them, this would have been over. Unless the Russian army could rally and the Prussian army under Blücher, who's actually a 1-point unit, which would have been possible to do both. Cut that supply. As it is, cutting the supply was good enough. However, the French do have Königsberg, which means the Prussians basically aren't going to get their bonus card. And, well, they're not going to get it anyway because Berlin has fallen. And then the extra point was used by Wellington, who destroyed the Spanish army that was facing him. And he's getting closer and closer to being able to take on Madrid. I might be throwing another British force down here to protect against Blake here, who could be a problem. I don't know where Avon is. And let's see, we also moved the army of Italy up to start projecting its power in what looks like it's the main effect. And that's the end of this year, 1812. Only 2 more left to go. And the Allies have to take at least one of the stars from the French. That's not too hard to do, given naval superiority, etc. So this could well end up as a draw, in which case I have these thoughts of pushing it into 15. I'm not sure. A little bit of stuff changes hands here. As the turn ends, supply checks on the demoralized Blücher's force. He spent his last supply wagon. They're cheaper than losing units, and he was likely to lose more than one, so that was a good move. Napoleon also had to take a supply check. No. Yeah, he had nowhere he could hop supplies from because the Swedes are out at sea. I'm assuming they can leave the blockade box after the city's taken. And that also meant that the Königsberg itself doesn't fall into his hands. Now, because the Prussians were able to get into supply, it actually didn't matter because the conquest and surrender happens after the attrition and supply is restored. So even if I had driven the Russians out, I would still have been in a screwed position. The Prussians were able to cut me either way. The only question I have is whether they would have been here. I think they had to be up here, in which case they wouldn't have been cut off from supply. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, we'll leave things as they are. A couple of conquests. Saxony went over to the French. That can be restored as a victory point when it gets turned into a protectorate. But Denmark went over to the British. Troops were eliminated. I think the Saxons are already dead. And that took a point away immediately. So now the victory level is at 16. We'll load this up. The next video is going to be the last. If I decide to go into 1815, it'll be a little long.